I was elated to hear Fred Fleitz just accepted the position of National Security Council Chief of Staff and Executive Secretary under White House National Security Advisor John Bolton. Americans should be grateful. The appointment is a huge score for enhancing our national security. We're all benefactors from President Trump's and Mr. Bolton's wisdom. Hosting a news radio show in Alaska can be intriguing, and also challenging at times, securing thoughtful guests that actually understand our northern issues and the nexus with the country as a whole. Our state's Arctic policy, military, and resource development issues affect the entire nation, not just the last frontier. It was through this venue I connected with Fred Fleitz, who became a regular and appreciated guest. I've interviewed national leaders and pundits from across the spectrum. They can be engaging, whether in Ann Coulter, Pat Buchanan, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, or former Governor Sarah Palin. Of all my guests, Fleitz has been one of the most effective in educating and explaining to listeners his rationale on foreign relations and security policy. I've interviewed him over 20 times. As a result, many listeners have come to appreciate government policy development and the evolution of sound national security policy that may have otherwise seemed esoteric. Fleitz hasn't forgotten Alaska, or its defensive and resource-rich value to the United States. His analysis and ability to tether military operations, or communications and transportation, to operational logistics involving North Korea and the Middle East has helped shed light on President Obama's obfuscated policies. Fleitz has taken a balanced approach on U.S. State Department issues, drawing from his experience with the Central Intelligence Agency as a senior analyst at the State Department as Bolton's former Chief of Staff, and with the House Intelligence Committee. The Fleitz appointment feels like a commercial plane ride with a seasoned pilot, or surgery with a reliable veteran surgeon, where you're relieved from anxiety because of the expertise at the helm. America is in good hands. When it comes to federal bureaucracy, I can attest to the perception from the public. For many of my listeners in Alaska, there is a deep, growing lack of trust. There is also disappointment. Morale and inspiration have waned under past presidential administrations that elevated ego and power above service to Americans. From Obamacare to Middle East and European obligations, my listeners consistently convey a feeling of abandonment by national leaders. Enter selfless advocates like Fred Fleitz and John Bolton, and suddenly a smidgen of hope is sprinkled on disillusionment. These guys have a backbone. Fleitz has taken a principled position on the Iran nuclear program, siding with Bolton against the majority of the U.S. foreign policy establishment, arguing that the U.S. had to pull out of the fraudulent deal. Fleitz took this stance even when other conservative advocacies knee-buckled and said stay in the horrific deal. He has been consistent on pulling out of the deal because it literally affords advancement of Iran's nuclear program. North Korea is no different. When our president, vice president, and foreign relations envoys are continuously disrespected by a communist regime in dire straits, it's time to end negotiations until respect is shown. Fleitz is on board with a thoughtful, yet hard-line approach to national security. It's about time. Here's another reason why the Fleitz appointment is important: he was made for the job. The Chief of Staff and Executive Secretary position to the National Security Council is critically important because that appointee helps Mr. Bolton present the President with a full scope of well-argued policy options, which is something President Trump was not receiving under H.R. McMaster. cogent, researched national security policy options are what the president expects from his management team, without success until now, under John Bolton's leadership. A president must know the risks, rewards, and resources to make the right decisions. A former CIA senior analyst of Fleitz's pedigree is appropriate and sensible to promote our best interests. Based on President Trump's recent exemplary appointments like Secretary of State Pompeo and Mr. Bolton, and assuming the President and Bolton want the same for the National Security Council management, Fleitz is the best choice. His expertise, coupled with a history of bucking conventional wisdom when it is antithetical to American interests, falls in line with candidate Trump's promise and commitment to his constituency. What I've seen and heard in Fleitz is a professional who isn't afraid of countering the swamp and the foreign policy establishment. If ever that matters, considering our interests being threatened abroad from Europe to Asia to the Middle East, it's now. Tom Anderson is a radio talk show host in Alaska and a former state representative. Politics. I was elated to hear Fleitz just accepted the position of National Security Council Chief of Staff and Executive Secretary under White House National Security Advisor John Bolton. Fleitz, Trump-Bolton, appointment 772 Friday 1 June 2018 2 p.m. 2018-0001 Friday 1 June 2018 2 p.m. Newsmax Inc.